On August 27, 1896, a war started at 9:02 in the morning. By 9:40, it was over. 38 minutes. One side surrendered before most of the soldiers had even finished loading their rifles. Historians call it the shortest war ever recorded. Most people have never heard of it. And that's strange, because if a war can end in the time it takes to eat breakfast and still get erased from memory completely, what does that say about the wars that lasted years, decades? What does it say about the ones that never technically ended at all? Most people believe the wars that shaped the modern world are the ones printed on the covers of textbooks. World War I redrew borders. World War II rebuilt the global order. The Cold War split the planet in half. That's the story we're told. And it isn't wrong. But it isn't the whole story either. Because underneath those wars, quietly, without parades or memorials, a different set of conflicts was doing something stranger. They weren't fighting over land. They were fighting over addiction, trade routes, a pig, a soccer match, a stolen flag. And somehow, these forgotten wars are still running underneath the world you live in today. The question is, which parts of your life are still being decided by battles nobody remembers fighting? Start with the one history books mention, but rarely explain properly. In 1839, the British Empire went to war with China. Not over territory, not over religion, over drugs. Britain had a problem. It wanted Chinese tea, silk, and porcelain, but China wanted almost nothing Britain produced in return. So British merchants found something the Chinese population would want, even though their own government had banned it. Opium, grown in British-controlled India, smuggled in by the ton. Addiction spread through Chinese ports. The Qing government seized and destroyed the drug stockpiles. Britain responded with warships. China lost. Badly. And the peace treaty wasn't really a peace treaty. It was a blueprint. Hong Kong was handed over. Chinese ports were forced open. Opium kept flowing, legally now, because the war had made refusal impossible. Historians in China still call the century that followed the century of humiliation. That phrase isn't poetic exaggeration. It's the actual term taught in Chinese schools today, describing everything from that war onward. That's the part most documentaries stop at. But it gets stranger. The opium trade didn't just addict a nation. It created the financial architecture of modern smuggling. The same shipping routes, the same laundering methods, the same bribery networks used to move opium into China in the 1840s became templates that organized crime groups refined for a century afterward. You can trace lines, imperfect but real, from Qing-era smuggling syndicates to the trafficking networks still operating in Southeast Asia today. And that's not even the weird part. Researchers looking into China's modern foreign policy keep running into the same historical reflex. The intense value China places on sovereignty, its wariness of foreign military presence, its sensitivity to being told what to do by Western powers. Diplomats and historians repeatedly trace that psychology back to one war fought over tea and drugs almost 200 years ago. A single war, technically minor in scale, arguably shapes how the second largest economy on Earth negotiates with the rest of the world right now. But this creates another problem. If a war fought over trade imbalance and addiction could reshape a civilization's psychology for centuries, what else did that? Look at the Pig War of 1859. Yes, that's the real name. An American farmer shot a pig belonging to a British company on a disputed island between Washington State and Canada. One dead pig. No human casualties in the entire conflict. And yet troops were mobilized. Warships were sent. And for over a decade the island sat in a tense standoff between two empires, because nobody could agree who actually owned it. The eventual resolution quietly finalized part of the modern US-Canada border, a border millions of people cross every year, shaped by a pig nobody remembers. Then there's Paraguay. In the 1860s, Paraguay fought a war against Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay combined. By the time it ended, some estimates suggest over half of Paraguay's population was dead. Some regions lost nearly 90% of their adult male population. The country had to functionally rebuild its gene pool. For decades afterward, Paraguayan law permitted and even encouraged polygamous households, not out of tradition, but out of demographic necessity. A war fought over borders reshaped the family structure of an entire nation, and most people outside South America have never heard its name. Then it gets stranger still. In 1969, El Salvador and Honduras went to war days after a heated World Cup qualifying match between the two countries. Newspapers nicknamed it the Football War. But the game wasn't the cause. It was the spark that ignited tension that had been building for years over land, migration, and unequal economic power between the two nations. The match just gave the anger a face, and the war that followed reshaped Central American migration patterns for generations, patterns that are still part of the region's politics today. Notice what's happening. None of these wars make it into the world's collective memory, but every single one of them is still quietly operating underneath something familiar. A border you cross, a political tension you read about, a trade dispute your government is currently negotiating, a drug policy debate happening in your own country right now. Because here's the uncomfortable part. The opioid crisis, reshaping entire communities across North America, didn't begin with a street dealer. It began with a legal, government-sanctioned drug economy, built on the same psychological and financial machinery, first perfected during a war fought to force one country to buy another country's drugs. The pattern didn't disappear. It just changed continents. Trade wars happening between global superpowers right now echo the exact same standoff that started in Chinese ports in 1839. One nation wanting access, another nation resisting, and force becoming the final argument when diplomacy fails. The names change. The shape doesn't. So the real question isn't which wars are famous enough to be remembered. It's which invisible wars are shaping your life at this exact moment. Wars that won't get a name in a textbook. Wars you won't recognize as history until you're already living inside the consequences. Somewhere right now, a small, unremarkable conflict is happening. A trade restriction. A border dispute. A currency disagreement nobody's paying attention to. In 200 years, it might be forgotten entirely, and in 200 years, someone might still be living inside its consequences without ever knowing why. The wars that get remembered are rarely the ones that matter most. The ones that quietly rewrite how nations think, how borders get drawn, how addiction spreads, how migration happens. Those disappear from memory almost on purpose, because they're too uncomfortable, too small, too embarrassing to memorialize. Which means the most powerful war in your life might not be one you've ever heard of. It might not have happened yet.